since we're a little bit after 7, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Deb Eschweiler. I am co-chair this academic year along with Heather Carroll, who unfortunately could not be here, of St. Kate's Student Governance Organization. I'm going to get that right one of these days. Otherwise known as SGO. And also who could not be here tonight from SGO is our communications officer, Janice Shearer. But everybody knows Janice because she also pretty much runs the department, as the four in front probably would attest to. But also here from SGO, our treasurer, Trish, who, if you ever have a money question, she's the one to ask. I also have candy. And she also is in charge of candy. We are bringing you the ePortfolio panel because, as a lot of you know, a lot of people don't know what ePortfolio is until they get to their last semester and when it's due, and that's a little too late to start thinking about the ePortfolio. So last year, the student chapter of the SAA got together and decided to put together an event very similar to this one to help out the students to help figure it out sooner, and David spearheaded that, and it was a big hit. It went over very well with the students that we decided that we would bring it over to SGO since it is more than an archiving problem. It's a student body-wide issue. So SGO would take it over and we'd be having these panels every semester basically until it's obsolete, till everybody knows and nobody needs it anymore. So that's our goal. So we have our professors here to help you with. They'll give some presentations. There'll be plenty of time for question and answers if you have any burning issues. And David will get us started right now with kind of an overview of a few things that he's going to talk about. And I'm going to go sit in this chair.
So again, my name is David Norris. I am the secretary of the St. Kate's chapter of SAA. I did spearhead this last year when we decided as the SAA board, that instead of everyone kind of running around and feeling frustrated and confused about the ePortfolio, let's get everyone together in the same room with the people who revised the SLOs and who put together the new ePortfolio, and have a dialogue. Bring our questions and get answers so that we're all on the same page, and like Deb said, we're not getting to the end of our last semester and feeling completely confused and dazed and panicked about submitting this thing called the ePortfolio. So this is going to be a little bit different from last year. Last year, a good chunk of the evening was dedicated to explaining the differences from the old SLOs and the way the ePortfolio was set up to the new system. Now we're in the new system. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. What we're doing moving forward, everyone who started spring of 2015 or later. Just out of curiosity, is anyone here from previous to that? Did they start before spring 2015? They have one? Okay.
Oh, but you don't count because you're SLMS.
I don't count. Yeah. Pretend I'm not here.
No, you just have, it won't matter.
In the way of our, wait, one more. Well, Laura, quick introduce our panelists this evening. We have Heidi Hammond, the LMS program, and Tony Molaro, our program chair, and Joyce Yukawa, the curriculum committee chair. Yes, this brought us our new SLOs. Another difference from last year, we didn't have time to do it this year. We did a preparedness survey. We sent it out to the student body. It's asking some general questions about where people feel that they're at in terms of understanding of the SLOs, the ePortfolio, and just what they're supposed to turn in at the end of their time in the program. These are some of the comments that I got back from the survey, and things like, how are we supposed to, well, actually the first one is not applicable this time. The second one, no, we're still hearing questions about that. No, do any of these comments ring familiar or true with anyone here? Yes, no, maybe? New questions, comments? We'll find out. So these are the questions that I asked in April going into this. I thought we could just start sort of with an informal poll of where people are, just visually, both for the faculty, so we kind of know where we are, and also as a way of not feeling alone in your confusedness, unsuredness. It helps when you find out that there are other people who have the same questions as you, which is nice. Out of curiosity, who is graduating this semester? A number of us. Okay. Who is graduating next semester? Another handful. Anyone graduating next year or kind of beyond? So most of us are graduating kind of 2-3 years out. This is good. This panel is for anyone at any point in the program, whether you are just starting out this semester or whether you are graduating this semester. So hopefully your questions will get answered. Question number 3. Does anyone have their ePortfolio completed at this point? Not really. Maybe 75, 50% complete? And who hasn't even started? Who has not really heard anything about the ePortfolio up until now? Okay. Most of us have, that's good. How about number 4? The SLOs. Who feels 100% totally sure of what all 12 of them mean?
Joyce isn't
No
even raising
clue.
her hand.
I giggled at the wrong time.
Who has no clue what the SLOs are about?
Why don't you say what the whole SLO means?
The SLOs.
Because they might not
yeah,
even know what that means.
good point.
Right.
We love acronyms in
Right.
LIS. Student learning outcomes. Did I get that right?
Right.
Learning outcomes, yes. Is what that is. So it's 12 breakdowns of the various ALA competencies. So we go forth and feel that we have a good grasp of what we're doing out in the world. How about number 4? Who has looked at the guidelines? Okay. My second question is, does everyone know where the guidelines are on St. Kate's website?
Okay, they know
Okay.
there. All right.
Because we'll walk through that just as a matter of course, just so we know. All right, so I will stop talking in a bit here. So this is kind of an informal outline of how I'm hoping the evening will go. We'll start with Joyce talking about the SLOs, Heidi will cover the artifacts, and then Tony will cover the ePortfolio itself and how it all comes together. But I'm hoping that the majority of the evening is your questions and comments. And hopefully we get a really good dialogue going and our faculty members learn something too. So I know last year a lot of questions were raised that were really good ones for them to know. Things that people were unclear about, things that needed more clarification. So hopefully as we continue to do these until we don't need to do them anymore, this will be sort of a refining process as we make this easier, clearer, less panic, stress-inducing. So, with that, I will turn this over to Joyce.
This is my little notepad, so if you have any wonderful questions, I'm going to write them all down so that we can improve. I am actually kind of surprised that there are so many people who are not doing it only this last semester and that many of you are planning ahead. I should be surprised about that part, but One of the reasons that we wanted to revise the whole ePortfolio process and the SLOs is that we felt, number one, the SLOs are 12 student learning outcomes. We previously had 12 student learning outcomes, and those were developed around 2009, and things have really changed quite a bit since 2009. So we have spent the past year and a half looking at the SLOs, looking at the field, asking professionals in the field, asking students, asking alumni, asking employers, and also looking at the LA accreditation standards to make sure that we are meeting those standards. But the other really important thing about the SLOs and the changes in the SLOs is the fact that we have a distinctive program, and we want our distinctive program to be seen in the SLOs. And so that was the reason that we revised them. Since everybody's looked at them, I'm not going to go over them. Is this it? Yeah, yes. I'm not going to go over them in great detail, but I would like, if you guys have any questions about any of them, to ask them now. In general, they're divided into 6 different areas: information for people, research, technology, social justice, literacy and learning, and professionalism and leadership. And I think one of the areas that we felt was not as prominent as we would like it to be is the social justice area, because we feel like we really do address this within the curriculum. And so we want that actually to be seen by people, So that was one area that we made a little bit more prominent. And under each of the areas, there are a pair of SLOs, and the first SLO is basically about theory, concepts, knowledge. The second SLO is about applying those theories and concepts and knowledge. And so in that way, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of both theory and practice, because those are both important, I think, to all of us. Just another comment about the SLOs. Each of the SLOs also then has behavioral indicators, which are things that help you understand more clearly what that SLO is about. And I think as you go through the program, not just in the last semester, I'm glad to see so many of you folks here now, as you go through the program, you'll have time to think about behavioral indicators, to think about the SLOs, and to really see how they apply to you and how they might apply to what you've done as you go through the program. And so our hope is that rather than panic at the end of your 2 some odd years, that it's an opportunity as you go through the program to really think about what you're doing, to change gear, change course if you have to, if you reflect back and say, this isn't really getting me where I want to go, and to work more closely with your advisor. And in the past, the portfolio process had been a look at the portfolio about midway through in a touchstone course, and then working to get your portfolio finished at the end of your academic career, and it was looked at by a portfolio review committee. What we really want to encourage people to do now is to have you work closely with your advisor, so that if you have a question about, say, this SLO or this behavioral indicator, and what does it mean, and does it really apply to this, that you can work with your advisor as you go through. So it's not such a panic thing at the end. At the end, it's more synthesizing, summarizing, and celebrating, because you guys have done fantastic stuff in the program, and so the portfolio should really be a celebration of the things that you've accomplished throughout your career here at St. Kate's. So I don't think I need to really go through this in detail, but I just did want to show you some of the differences in why we changed the SLOs. For one example, number 6, old SLO 6 was demonstrate information technology fluency. Do we know what that means, actually? There were behavioral indicators for this, so you could kind of understand what it meant, but we've tried to clarify that. into two SLOs, one of which is understand the social, cultural, and ethical implications of technologies on individuals, organizations, society, and the library and information professions. So I think that's a little bit clearer about what we hope you will know. And then in terms of practice, critically analyze, select, use, apply, and evaluate technologies in the information environment. So I think it's a little bit clearer and probably more impactful and grounded in the current state of the profession to say that rather than demonstrate information technology fluency. So that is why we changed the SLOs. So, do you folks have any? Yeah, Jennifer.
Sorry. So, is this crosswalk available somewhere?
It's
For some
on
of
the
us,
website.
95%
It
of our
is.
work has been with the SLOs, previous
With the
SLOs.
previous ones. That's why we created this. So if you go to that lis.stk.edu site and go to the ePortfolio,
Oh, okay,
piece.
there it is.
then go here and you will find the crosswalks. They've just been recently posted up there.
Okay, all right, that's why. Oh, thank you.
Do you have folks that have any other questions about the SLOs?
Say if you're looking back through your body of work and you realize, I don't have a whole lot of some, like, say you're more in the information science end of the world instead of the, public library, and you haven't done a whole lot of projects that focus on social justice. How would you suggest dealing with that? Incorporating the social justice SLO if you don't really feel like you have much that touches on that.
Well, you know what I would do? I would advise that you work with your advisor on that.
Okay.
But I also think that there may be dimensions of some of the projects that you've done that maybe don't shout social justice, but the implications are there. For example, if you're doing web design and you do web usability, accessibility, the accessibility part really is a social justice piece, and so you can actually look at what you've done and kind of see other dimensions of it and see how you can connect it to the SLO, And I think that's a really good question because I think your interpretation, rather than taking the SLO's rote and going, okay, this SLO as it is applies to this project, it's a matter of you thinking through what it means for you and then applying that in your own words to whether it's an artifact from a class or an extracurricular activity, a publication, a conference presentation, leadership, in an organization.
Okay.
So, great question. Any other? Yeah.
I'm gonna ask this because I asked this last year too, and I thought it was a good question. When you're looking at the SGOs, SLOs, sorry,
I love that.
too many acronyms. Your artifacts that you're attaching to your ePortfolio, they don't need to hit every single one of the A, B, C, D.
No,
Those are
No.
more guidelines to help
understand
you understand
yeah.
what your reflection should be about. Okay.
I would even say too, that you can actually go beyond what's here as well, because just as Deb was saying, I mean, some folks are interested in special libraries. Some folks are interested in academic libraries. Some folks are interested in corporate libraries, And so the way in which you interpret that for your environment might be a little bit different, I mean, we do information organization in all kinds of libraries, but how you actually implement that, how you think about it, and how you implement it in a particular context might be different. So you could almost, rewrite some of the SLOs for yourself or some of the behavioral indicators. Yeah.
This is just my first semester, so I don't
Yeah.
know a whole lot about all of this, I guess, but from my understanding, multiple SLOs go with each artifact, and you have like different artifacts from each class, right?
Right.
So how many artifacts does someone end up with in their ePortfolio, or how many like SLOs generally go with each artifact? Like, is there an average or an expectation?
There is not really an expectation in terms of what kinds of SLOs you apply to an artifact. There are requirements for the artifacts, numbers of artifacts. You're required to have at least 3 artifacts from your core courses, so 70-10, 70-30, 70-40, so one from each of those courses. And then 4 artifacts, and you can select from required courses or elective courses, so you can select 4 artifacts. And you can go beyond that, you know, if you do things like, say you present a paper at a conference, or you do volunteer work, or, you know, you have leadership in a student organization, you can actually write an extended essay. This is different from the reflection that goes on the reflection page. But you can write an extended essay, which is a description of what it was that you did, what it was that you learned, and how that applies to the SLOs, or how it relates to the SLOs. So you can do that as well. And sometimes people have said, you know, sometimes their extracurricular activities have been so valuable. So I would encourage everybody to do volunteer work, to do presentations, to do work outside, to take leadership in organizations, and then use those experiences as artifacts. And then what you would do then is you would create that reflection on your experience. You would post that on the artifact page, and then you would integrate, you know, a reflection on that artifact of experience in your reflection page.
Okay, so you need a minimum of 7 artifacts.
Yes.
Is that, like, do people generally just go with 7, or do they go with more?
It varies,
Yeah, it
Joyce.
varies.
It varies.
Yeah, it really
Okay.
varies.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think another interesting thing too is that people write them differently. And I imagine that because we're doing what we're doing now, we'll have even more variation. But a common, oh, Tony is probably going to talk about this, sorry about that.
No, I do not have any prepared remarks. Steal all the thunder, I have no problem.
But, you know, I think early on, people tended to go artifact by artifact.
Right.
And I think recently, people have done more things like, maybe there is an SLO that's like really critical to them, and they follow that thread through several artifacts, you know. Or it might even be something that's much more personal to you, not necessarily artifact by artifact or SLO by SLO, but you might have a personal theme, you know, that relates to several SLOs and maybe several artifacts. I don't know, I mean, I'm just kind of making this up off the top of my head right now, but, you know, I think there's, you know, there's a variation in the way you can actually
Okay.
do that. For those of you who didn't raise your hand about completely understanding the SLOs, and I didn't either, I just want to make a short note about the SLOs. Student learning outcomes are basically what the faculty have worked on over a number of years in terms of what is the core of our program. You know, what is it that we feel is really, really important for you folks to learn? And the core of the program is what you folks learn. And so the student learning outcomes are the expression of what we feel is most important. So, you know, I mean, a lot of times we tend to just, we go, oh, well, you know, this course addresses this SLO and this SLO and this SLO, you know, and so we kind of look at it as a list that's associated with course content. But honestly and truly, I think a lot of us do actually think through those pretty carefully. And we try to relate them to, like, the assignments in class, the content of the class. So it's not just a list, but it is actually representative of what we think is really valuable content. So, any other? Okay, I forgot to take notes. I'll write them down here.
I advise the school library media specialists, and this summer I revised their SLMS portfolio guidelines to be more in alignment with the MLIS portfolio guidelines. So you'll find them on the same page, but the difference between the SLMS portfolio and the MLIS portfolio is that the school library students also have to select artifacts that will support or provide evidence that they have met the 6 state competencies from the Minnesota Board of Teaching. And I think you'll find those 6 state competencies, you know, one is on reading, one is on technology, one is on library administration and so forth. They also, I can just show you those real quick. They start here and they are labeled A through F. they also have sub-competencies, just like our SLOs have indicators of what that would look like in practice. Your reflection paper almost writes itself with all this verbiage that's provided with the sub-competencies. And when you're writing that reflection paper, I think, like Joyce said, you need to decide what your organization is going to be. Like she said, artifact by artifact might not have as much impact as taking what did you learn that was most important to you. And I don't think, even though you may have one artifact that addresses several SLOs and a few of the state competencies, if you're a school library media specialist, I don't think you have to talk about all of the SLOs or all of the state competencies that apply to that particular artifact. I think it depends on the flow of your paper. As long as your paper addresses the artifacts, you don't want to have a page of artifacts that you never discuss. That doesn't make sense. So let's talk about those artifacts for a minute. I think most of your professors will be suggesting artifacts that you want to include in your portfolio. And when you pop it in your portfolio, it's like putting it into a file cabinet. When you do that, you may want to list the SLOs or Minnesota State competencies that you think that artifact addresses, because if you go back to it later, you go, God, why did I put this in my portfolio? I don't remember what I was thinking back then. And I would also write a sentence or two then as a reminder to yourself. And then when you write that reflection paper, I wouldn't look at it as a chore, but then I'm not a student anymore. But someone once said that reading without reflection is like eating without digestion. And I think the same applies for your learning. This is an opportunity for you to reflect back on what you've learned and what was important to you and how you see it being, how you see yourself applying it in your future field. Whatever position you take in the library or information field. So when you are meeting with your advisors, if you don't, you meet with your advisors midway through your program, you should have a few artifacts in your portfolio by then that you can show them. And it's at that point that you can start thinking about what other kinds of artifacts am I going to gather? Because unless you're a school library student on that rigid pathway, you still have some choices of what you will be taking, and of course it's for your electives. So, I don't know, are there any questions about the artifacts? Elizabeth?
So for every artifact you put in, you don't have to write, or you should, okay, so I've been doing it. For every artifact that I've put in, I've written a couple of paragraphs about why. Is that, but then I complete a reflection paper at the end of all of them, or is a reflection paper for each artifact?
No, it's one reflection paper at the end. But those notes that you have put in there are going to help you write that reflection paper.
Okay.
And with those notes, I would include the SLOs and state competencies.
Okay. So the paragraphs that I have, should I keep them where they are? Or should I just
that's
put them-
fine.
Like,
That's
is that
fine.
gonna be, should I have that displayed for you guys to see at the end, or no? not
I don't,
necessarily?
Deb, you're the one, I don't mind when I look at portfolios. We
If it's
have,
both places, it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
we have two people on a rotating committee that evaluate portfolios for the MLIS students. The SLMS students are stuck with me. And your student teaching supervisor, Leslie Yoder. And a difference for the school library media folks is they have a slightly different deadline. Their portfolio is actually an assignment in their 7283 or 7286 which is like their practicum course, it's their student teaching course. And whereas the MLIS portfolio is due mid-semester, the school library portfolio is due either December 1st for a fall December graduation, fall semester graduation, or May 1st for a spring graduation. But that's our first look at it. And we will give you feedback, and then the final due date for your portfolio after you've received feedback is December 15th, at which point it will be perfect, or May 15th. Because if it's not, you won't pass the course and you won't graduate. And we'll just send it back and tell you, you know, what improvements you need to make. But that day, you have a chance to also present it. You have a seminar that goes along with your student teaching class, and you have a chance to present your portfolio and get feedback from your students too, because you learn from each other. You go, oh, hey, that's kind of cool, or I didn't think about that. And I wouldn't advise at that point to totally change your platform, you know, from D2L to something else, but because that would be a lot of work. But you might see some things that other students have done and say, oh, yeah, I could do that. I've got an assignment similar to that. I believe if you go to the guidelines, if you go to the resources, when you look at the SLMS guidelines, there is also a sample SLMS portfolio with all the tabs. The school library folks have a couple extra tabs, and a couple of them are really easy. One is just a whole bunch of standards that I think school librarians ought to know about, like the SCU standards and the SAA-SC standards and so forth. You just copy and paste that. It's kind of window dressing because we see the portfolio not only as a way for you to think about what you've learned and demonstrate to us that you have thought about what you've learned, but also as an interviewing tool. And I would take my laptop with me to an interview, and I'd have that portfolio ready, because you will be asked questions and you can say, oh yes, I've done something like that, and show them that particular artifact. The school library folks also put in their student teaching sites, and they've got their log in there from their student teaching where they log all their hours and what they did and so forth. That's not difficult. It's just stuff I need to see that really Deb doesn't need to see. but we've included it in the portfolio because it's part of the course. I think I may have said everything I need to say. I will talk to the school librarians. I will talk to you at midpoint, but also right before you student teach, you have to do a student teaching, a pre-student teaching interview, at which point you also show me the portfolio and everything you've learned so far. So your portfolio gets checked pretty regularly along the way.
How different does our final portfolio need to be from the student teaching portfolio that you guys already reviewed? Like, how much change do you?
I'm
how
not
much
understanding your
overlap?
question.
So when I did my student teaching interview,
Right.
how much overlap from that should be, from there to my
Probably
final portfolio?
Probably you could use quite a bit.
Okay.
Now, Anna is a initial licensure student, and before she could student teach, she had to do a pre-student teaching interview with the education department where she addressed 7 out of 10 teaching competencies. But those, right?
Yeah.
Right? And she did it on the task stream platform. Well, you have to do it on D2L or a platform of your choice. You won't be using TaskStream because you just won't do that. And some of those same artifacts you'll use because I think that they address a lot of the similar things that you'll find in the MLIS SLOs and the Minnesota State competencies. Because a large role what I think is probably the most important role of a school librarian is the instructional role. So that fits in really well with the teaching competencies. Don't you all want to be school librarians? Okay, I can talk to school library folks afterwards if they have specific questions that don't apply to anyone else.
So I'm gonna keep it a little short because I think you wanted questions to start at 7:45. It is 7:41.
Flexible.
So I'm gonna just go over a couple of things. I hope you all know how to get to this page. The easiest way is lis.st.edu. There's a tab that says graduate, you click on that. Then about a third of the way down, you'll see something that says portfolio. You click on that and that takes you to this beautiful page. That's the fastest way to get here. Of primary importance is I've already done all of this talking and created a tutorial, which you're free to watch at your leisure. And there are two examples of portfolios. One is an older one and one is a newer one. So you can look at them. So, and the guidelines, which I'm just gonna go through real quick, are up there. So there are 5 key elements of the portfolio. The first element is the home page, the splash page, the landing page, which I will digress and say you can use whatever platform you want. D2L is what the university provides for you, but I've seen really good portfolios on WordPress and Weebly. So if you want to go that route, you're more than welcome to do so. It's personal preference. You need to make it visible to the 2 people reviewing the portfolio. Probably should make it visible to your advisor as you're talking to them throughout the process. And for this semester, Deb Torres. After that, we'll figure it out. So those 3 people need to be able to see it. So the home page is just going to be a very brief introduction to who you are. It's where you can put your cat pictures, your tote pictures, all of these types of fun things. But from then on, it gets serious. Second element is the philosophy and goals section. So you want to list your professional goals. I am Deb. I am interested in archives and special libraries, particularly as it relates to audiovisual, something like that, right?
Wow.
Close. I'm
honored.
So that would be one of your professional goals. You might list a couple other professional goals, like I'm going to conquer the world by being in charge of every committee on campus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be included in your philosophy and goals statement. Then where students really get interested or hung up are the third and the fourth elements, which is the narrative or reflection and the artifacts. So as Joyce mentioned, these pages are organized typically one of 3 ways. One, by course. So we'll see some people organize their portfolio 70-10, and they'll have 2 or 3 artifacts from 70-10 that hit 3 or 4 SLOs. Catherine asked a question about how many SLOs should be attached to an artifact. When I reviewed portfolios, we would always send back, we're not looking for your laundry list. So I would say don't go more than 2 SLOs per artifact. That's just one faculty member's perspective. But that seemed to be common when we reviewed these portfolios. So you might organize it that way. You might organize it by SLO. So for SLO 1, I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to use this artifact to prove proficiency, and I'll use this artifact as a secondary point. And the third way is something.
By artifact.
By artifact. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. By artifact, which is then straightforward. And then usually we've seen that way either alphabetical by the name of the artifact or by course. Whatever you want. Either way works. The reflection, so somebody mentioned 2 or 3 paragraphs. Who was that? Are you SLMS? Okay. Typically in our portfolios, they're not 3 paragraphs per SLO. I'm looking to Joyce for, they're typically 3 or 4 sentences per SLO. Your reflection is allowed to be as long as it needs to be. But, so Catherine wanted to know, like, what's the average? The average is 3 or 4 sentences, 1 paragraph per SLO.
Per artifact, is that right?
Per artifact or SLO, depending on how they organize the document. Does that make sense? Then the final element is your resume. All of this needs to be made public to us until you get an email telling you can take it down, which is the semester of, right? So if you're turning in your portfolio this semester, we ask that you keep it live through the end of the semester so that we can download everything for our archival purposes. Are we doing okay so far? What do you guys think?
I don't want the SLMS folks to get excited about the goal statements that you mentioned, because you include a statement of philosophy that you write in 7730, your management course. You don't have to do a separate goal. We know you want to be a school librarian.
Jennifer.
Right.
And that piece, the philosophy and such, is not included for the ePortfolio for people who started earlier, correct?
Correct. There, prior to this version, there were 4 elements, although that was included in the reflection element. So it's been pulled out and made its own section.
So for those of us who started earlier, should we have somewhere in there, sort of this portfolio adheres to the guidelines for students who started earlier?
I would say only if you're an outlier. So if you're saying, I'm using the old guidelines,
Right.
but I believe we're asking everybody to use the new guidelines.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you have it out there for
No,
students starting summer or fall 2015, or 2011 to 2015?
when are you graduating? This semester, right? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I would just put on there, I'm following these guidelines.
Right.
You won't get a negative comment for that.
This will be updated.
Yeah. So
After this.
on the guidelines, it also includes a whole lot of things like when is everything due? Those of you that are graduating soon will have received already an email from Janice telling you when the deadlines is. If you're planning on graduating, you didn't receive that email, that means we don't know you're planning on graduating. So you'll want to let her know right away. The other thing I want to point out is there's also a rubric, so how faculty tend to evaluate these. I'm gonna throw out a number, it's a guess, but I would say only 20% of people pass on the first try. So a lot of people get an email from one of the 2 people on the portfolio committee saying needs revision. Don't be alarmed, it's usually minor stuff. Oftentimes people don't address all 12 SLOs, so make sure you address all 12 of them and have somebody else look at it and count. Because that's what we do. I go SLO1, SLO, and I drew a little spreadsheet to make sure you covered them. If you're submitting artifacts that are not in PDF, we often say, make this a PDF. Joyce uses a Mac. I use either a Mac or a Chromebook. Other people use PCs. Sometimes we can't open your artifacts depending on the version of the computer we use. That's why we ask for PDF. Sometimes the writing, it is clear to the portfolio committee that you wrote this 5 days before you submitted. Like it's abundantly clear. So oftentimes we'll say, your writing needs to be improved.
Little polishing.
Little polishing. Now it depends on who that person is and what kind of mood they're in. So how that statement comes across. But, yeah. So any questions on that? Joyce?
I just want to clarify for Jennifer, I was a little confused. It's not the portfolio guidelines and the rubric that are being implemented now.
It's the SLOs.
It's the SLOs. We are now using the new SLOs, even if you
Right.
came in before.
Yeah.
So there's the crosswalk.
Yeah, so the crosswalk is there.
Well, and I would say that, I don't know about the reflection essays that are up there, but the examples that are in the SLA sample portfolio, we expect better than that. Okay? I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just not saying they're necessarily excellent, they are examples. Okay, so you want to exceed expectations.
Have you ever had people submit videos, and is there a preferred method of receiving videos as submissions?
I know we have, I haven't had that as
Have
what,
been links to YouTube
Yeah.
things, like book trailers or something?
I would suggest making sure that it's hosted somewhere that anybody can view it. So I wouldn't submit, you would know better than I, an MP4, is that a video file?
Mhm.
In case the person can't, for whatever reason, open an MP4. So YouTube, Google Drive, some platform that has a built-in viewer or something like that, I think would make the most sense. Good question.
Similar note, PDFs, do you prefer that they be embedded or with a link for using a site other than D2L, say WordPress, where you have to use the paid version to actually embed the PDF?
No, I would say links. Most of this is done with a link to an actual PDF document, as opposed to, what is it, like a scrib, where you have to scroll through in the document. I would not be happy to read it that way, so I'm sure that other people would. Good question, though. The other thing to make sure you do is to name things in an appropriate way. The guidelines specify on the reflection page what elements you need to have on the narrative page. So one, you have to have the SLOs listed, on the other one, you have to have your courses listed. Make sure you complete both of those. And then it's really helpful to link between the artifact page and the reflection page. It makes it easier for the faculty reader. Because on the artifact page, you do a brief annotation. It just helps us in terms of not getting lost in your portfolio, if that makes sense. Good questions.
Oh, and in your, maybe you just said this, I was so busy thinking about those artifacts. In your reflection paper, when you mention an artifact, have a link to the artifact page, so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you just say that?
That's, yeah. Link between them. It just makes it easier for us. You can choose not to, but you might get the needs revision, please link between these two pages.
Yeah.
Really good questions. Other questions? Questions for all of us? So, yes.
In the reflection, you said it's about like a paragraph per SLO or per artifact. How much of that is then like, you're showing like what you've learned, but how much do you have to describe the artifact first so that you have reference to that? Or can you just link it and then they can look at the annotation you made to understand what the project was?
So that's why you annotate in the artifact page, so that you shouldn't have to duplicate the annotation. My opinion, I'm looking always for confirmation. You shouldn't have to duplicate that annotation in your reflection. Good question. That's why we asked you to link back and forth. And some people just name things really funny, and so it's hard for us to know what the artifact is. That's why linking back and forth is helpful. For your puppies and freedom slideshow that you'll include as an artifact, that I'm supposed to know that that was about intellectual freedom from 7010, but your naming convention does not imply that at all. So, yeah. Other questions? Most important advice is to do this every semester. 70-10, 70-30, 70-40 faculty should be telling you to do this. If they're not, let Joyce or I know so that we can bother people. But the agreement among the faculty is this is our process. And your advisor should be at least contacting you, saying, don't forget I exist. I'm very used to people not responding to that email, but I send that email every semester. Meet with your advisor. Typically, I'll be honest, my advisees meet with me in the summer because they feel like that's an easy time for it. So we go and meet at a coffee shop and we go through their portfolio for an hour. It doesn't take real long, but it's not particularly time intensive. If you're doing it every semester. If it's panic mode and it's October 10th, it's due October 15th for those of you graduating this term. If you're trying to do this on October 10th, you're going to have a terrible time. the caffeine pills, whatever you need to get it done. We'll pray for you. That much, I'll call the sisters up. There's not much we can do at that point. Other questions?
I have a question that I haven't heard anyone ask, and that is about group work as artifacts. And how do you handle that? How do the reviewers expect that to be handled when you're using an artifact that was a product of a group of people, and there's a lot of project work in our classes,
Yeah.
you know.
Good
so,
question.
Yeah,
I'll answer, and all of my answers are as a faculty member, not as a
Right.
program director.
Right.
Just as somebody who served on this, the portfolio panel, because the two faculty that couldn't come today, that's why I'm here. Group work was always accepted as an artifact. You should let your group members know that you're doing it, and this happens in my classes, because I use a lot of Google Docs. I cannot help you find a Google Doc that David created after he's graduated. It goes away. That's why I always tell people to put a copy on your own folder, on your own Google Drive account, so that you have it. But I would say you need to let people know that you're doing this, because their name is on it.
right.
Good question. Did I answer the question? I feel like I answered the question. I feel like people are getting tired too. It's warm in here. Other questions?
This was a question that came up at our working group on Saturday. For calling out the SLOs, do you want us to actually list them in sort of a citation format of sentence SLO 1?
That's how it's most commonly done.
Okay.
Don't lift the behavioral indicator or the SLO statement and plunk that in. It should say something like, I'm trying to think of the leadership SLOs. How sad is it that I don't have them memorized? Because David's been in my management class. So,
You might want to go to the other ones, where are they?
The leadership's at the end of the new ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Or professionalism and leadership, yeah.
So you would not plunk in SLO 11, this in the text. You would say, through my consulting work, let's pick the closest one, analyze an organization and its projects for assessment. That's not a complete sentence, so don't say it like that. You get the point. And then you would say, left parenthesis, SLO 11, and then typically a reflection. I never wanted you to plunk this in or these in. And that's, the portfolio review committee pays close attention to that. I don't know if Joyce has other comments on it.
No, I completely agree. I mean, to me, it's like, reflecting on what it is that you learned, you know, and associating. I mean, this helps you define what it is that you can associate with that artifact, but it should be something that's close to you and meaningful to you, you know, so you express it in your own words, because if it comes to that point where you're talking to an employer or you're in an interview, you want to be able to bring it up, you know, and be able to connect it immediately with that artifact. And so if you're writing it in your own words and you've made that thing meaningful to you as you're going through and reflecting and, you know, writing a paragraph, then that's probably the most important thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, good question. Other questions?
But don't be afraid to use those words that you see there.
Right.
I mean, if you are using your advocacy project from the leadership class, you're going to use the word advocacy and you're going to use the word leadership.
Yeah.
They're listed on this.
How many people are afraid of the portfolio? Just 1.5. It's really not that bad. As long as you stay on top of it, it's not that bad. I can tell you nobody's ever failed. Nobody's ever been prevented from
I was just
graduating.
gonna ask you that, has anyone
Yes.
not been approved?
Everybody's been approved. Some people, the faculty, have to email you several times. And the emails get more and more threatening and ominous. I mean, the emails will say things like, if you don't turn this in, you will not be graduating. But this is not designed to be some punitive experiment. This is an opportunity for you to reflect, as Heidi mentioned. It's important to reflect in terms of learning. Anybody can just spit out things that we tell you to spit out. That's not what we're looking for here. And lastly, I'll say this. This is not an employment portfolio. So sometimes there's questions about, should I be turning this in for a job? The answer to that would be no. I think in Heidi's case, it's different than in a public or an academic library. You wouldn't submit this.
Well, you've got your portfolio and you can modify it to meet your needs afterwards and make it a tool if you wish. And one thing I'd like to say about the reflection paper is that Tony mentioned 3 different ways to organize it, and once you decide on a way, stick with it, don't mix it up. But also think about it as a story about your learning.
Those are the most compelling ones.
Just because you may be going SLO by SLO or artifact by artifact doesn't mean that your writing can't be elegant and a pleasure to read.
And I guess the last thing I would say about the artifacts is don't try and pull a fast one. So
What do you mean by that?
I would say, like, I'm trying to think of a very clear-cut example. I'll use my classes because it's easier for me to talk about my classes. My management classes don't spend a lot of time talking about organization of materials, right? So don't say in management, artifacts from 7700 as a way to prove that you have mastery of SLO, I think 3, right? Or the organization of knowledge. Does that make sense? It has nothing to do with that.
Well, you know, a dead giveaway is, we put the SLOs in the syllabus, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the easy thing. If you notice, I hope every syllabi has the SLOs for the major assignments, or at least for the course as a whole. I'm seeing yeses.
When we're putting our artifacts in, there should be no attempt to try to fix what we maybe did our first semester that we're not as proud of now. Okay.
No.
Just,
But there is,
I wasn't planning on it, I was just asking.
no, the faculty are not like, oh, look at her, bro, way back when in 7010. How could she even say that? That's not, we're not
Say
doing that.
that.
That paper's horrible.
We're not grading your artifacts.
Yeah,
They've
we're not
already been
regrading
graded.
And to be honest, we would hope to see you have progressed as a human beings from 7010 to the end of the experience here. So, yeah, don't go back.
But usually we're just blown away
Yeah.
by the portfolios. We really are. They are, for the most
Top
part,
notch.
very impressive.
And ask any of the faculty, we don't reread our dissertation. Because there are typos. All of us know where those typos are. Even after copy editing, proofreading, paying people, it's still there. So, good question. Other questions? Yes.
This is maybe more comment than question. I am delighted to hear that this is an assignment for in the student teaching class, and intrigued to hear that there is an expectation that each class has the expectation that you'll add something, because I'm in my 4th term and that has not been my experience yet. I think so far 7010 is the only class that had an explicit expectation that we would start and put something in our portfolio, and my classmates might feel completely differently about this than I do, but for me, it is nearly impossible to do anything without an externally imposed deadline. And so as much as I know that I'm supposed to be a grown-up and I'm supposed to add to it every semester, without the nudge from, like, that it's on the syllabus, like that there's, like, maybe it's an ungraded assignment at the end of every class or something, I find that, and just because of course the end of every semester is so stressful anyway, I'm only 4 semesters or 4 terms in, like I don't have that much catch up to do yet, but I find it hard to keep up with on my own and I would be curious if everyone else agrees that it would be really helpful to have some nudges.
And I think there was less emphasis on it when I started this
Yeah.
program 3 years ago.
The process is morphed, as Joyce has mentioned. This used to be embedded in a midterm
Courses.
course in a final course that everybody took. So I appreciate the comment. We as a faculty struggled with how to best implement the process without creating busy work. So would you want 2 final assignments at the end of every class, one your actual assignment and one your portfolio? My hunch is most people would be like, I can just get through final already, and to add something on would be probably too burdensome. So it's that balance of, but I appreciate what you're saying, for sure.
Well, and just to make a comment, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this.
Yeah.
Was towards the beginning of the semester, was to get this, in the consciousness of everyone. This is something that we need to be thinking about as we go into the semester, so that we are looking at assignments, different things to put into the portfolio.
Did I see a hand up somewhere? Yes.
I say, because I feel exactly the same way, and I'm graduating this fall. But I would say even like making it where you have to turn something in saying you've talked to your advisor midway through. Because I mean, I love Molly, but she's a very busy lady and kind of, I don't know, I can feel like I reach out to her, but at the same time, I don't want to bother people.
Yeah.
It's our job,
So
you're
I
not bothering us.
So that should,
Just
can I
and I
ask
didn't
a,
get mentioned, so I didn't ever really think about it. So even reaching out to Molly, didn't enter my head until I'm like, oh, that's due soon, kind of thing.
can I ask a question? How would you feel if you were not allowed to register for a course? Like, we can do that. I can set up a system that won't let you register midway through. Like, once you had 15 hours, 16 hours. My hunch is some of you would be upset because you wouldn't be allowed in the classes you want. So just, how systematic do you want me to make it?
I don't know, I'm like it's not done.
Yeah, so-
That's what I think.
But a
Maybe not
reminder.
that systematic.
Like a reminder, I don't know,
Like a reminder?
kind of thing.
So,
Halfway through check.
how
Because now
many
we
of you?
don't have Touchstone.
Let me ask this way. How many of you are past halfway through the program? How many of you received an email from your advisor?
At midpoint.
Are you my advisee?
Nope,
Oh,
don't worry.
no, I'm pointing at Jennifer.
No, I'm not either,
Okay,
but my.
because I send every advisee every semester gets an email from me. So I maybe should encourage faculty advisors to be more communicative. Okay. I don't have pen and paper. Will somebody email me that?
I'm putting
At
it,
8:10
I'm putting
at
it in
night,
my phone.
I'm not gonna remember, I don't even know where I parked it.
I'll write it
Because
down
I'm that
before you
person that
sign.
wanders around in the parking lot like, I don't know where I parked it. Thank you.
I appreciate the comments because while I don't require students to put up an artifact from one of my courses in their portfolio, I mention it verbally, usually on the last day of class. But maybe what I should do is in my syllabus, make a suggestion that this might be portfolio worthy, this assignment might be portfolio worthy.
What if they picked a different assignment?
And that's fine. I
Just
might make, one or two, but,
Yeah.
like take the leadership class. I know at the end of that class, I know, EJ, that I said, you might want to put your advocacy project in your portfolio. But, it was one comment on the last day of class, we're all shoving food in our mouth.
So we'll go
Well,
Molly
actually,
and
we
Molly.
didn't meet because there was a snowstorm.
I haven't taken that class. That
Oh,
was
okay.
Okay. Molly and then Molly.
So mine's a little off topic. It's more of a design question. I'm using WordPress, so I was wondering with the linking from reflections to artifacts, do you want, I don't know if there's a preference with the faculty looking at it, if they want, one long page with the artifacts all there, or do you want kind of a drop-down menu with the different
I would say a single long
long
page. In the center of that should be the artifacts with an annotation and a link. And the artifact, it specifies in the guidelines that you need to say what course that was, both the number and the name of the course. And then I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's a sidebar.
It's a sidebar. I don't
And on
think
the
it says
artifacts,
which side
SLOs.
at the SLOs. Yeah. So I would say do a single, not a drop down.
Okay.
Good question.
Mine's actually hooked back to the whole trying to remember, and I think it's a good idea to put it in the syllabus. Because if a teacher verbally tells you something, even if you put it in your notes, then you may not look back at your notes, and then you know that you said something, because you're like, oh, you didn't tell us that, and then it's in the syllabus.
I can tell you, all of the full-time faculty that I'm aware of have the SLOs for their course listed in their syllabi.
Oh, yeah,
That certainly is in there.
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Just like a random technical question. So for example, with PowerPoint, I know WordPress, the free version, you can embed that. So if like you have a Google Slides presentation, you can embed that in there. Would that be okay? And then it would back up the PDF?
I would
or
download it as a
Just
PDF.
do the PDF? Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if faculty, I do portfolio review on a computer, but some of the faculty might do it on a phone. So that's why I would recommend just making sure everything is PDF.
The other thing I've heard is that students sometimes create groups.
Yeah.
You know, and
Show up
work
on
together
Sunday.
to keep themselves going forward on a portfolio, so that might be another one.
Yeah, there's a group of you that meet on Saturdays. I've seen.
Every non-class Saturday. We're meeting downstairs in one of the classrooms around 10:30 to about 2:30. We hash out a lot of these questions amongst ourselves. Hopefully some of these have been answered today.
Excellent.
But anyone is welcome, whether you're just starting the program or you are graduating in December.
Well, that was very proactive of you. And I think it's very proactive of all of you to be here tonight.
Yeah.
You know, to feel more comfortable about the process and the product.
I'll turn it back over to David, or are we just done?
The only thing I would add is a thank you to our faculty, to Tony and Heidi and Joyce for coming and sharing with us tonight.
And
So
thank you to David.
Thank you.
And thank you to SGO for kind of spearheading this too and taking this on and organizing it. And then lastly, a thank you to our camera person in the back, Chris Eschweiler. Again, this will be available later for you to review. If there's anything that you missed that you want to go back and review, same for all of you, Tony, Heidi, Joyce. We will also be closed captioning it.
Yes, and I can't give you any guarantees right now, but I'm gonna try to edit it this week, since I don't have real clients. So I'm gonna try to take advantage of that time. So, and thanks to all of you for coming.
Yes.
Makes it makes us happy to know that you're finding the topic as worthwhile as we do.